One narrative I feel that I have perhaps overworn in talking about games, especially games of the 90s, are the stories of certain industry juggernauts. I feel that if you listen to me long enough, you're going to hear me explain broadly the history of LucasArts and the history of Sierra, and the way that they philosophically differed as to how to manage the narrative adventures that we now call point and clicks. This usually means talking about some great LucasArts classics, then complaining at length about the way that Sierra ruined everything in their development of the genre. I think it's important, though, to take a moment to draw attention to a time that Sierra made a better LucasArts game than LucasArts made, within some constraints. Let's talk about some 1990s environmentalist kids culture and the story of EcoQuest. In EcoQuest, you take on the role of Adam, a painfully earnest and sweet little kid, son of an oceanographer and environmentalist, as he starts a long, boring summer having just moved to a new place. Adam's an insular kid who prefers the company of the animals his dad researches because he feels awkward and weird. Then he learns that the dolphin he befriends can talk, and thus begins an amazing adventure under the sea. There's a lot to unpack in the story of Adam and his dolphin buddy Delphinus. There's this way the story puts importance on healing and surviving and on fixing things. There's the way that the first trait of Adam that starts him on this story is empathy, and that his heroic actions begin from expressing sincere trust in someone that he cares about. The story is youthful and earnest and sweet, and it comes from a particular place of 1990s dork. It's about environmentalism in a really specific, get the kids involved, it'll be cool kind of way, but not the radical saving teens way. It's about picking up litter and learning about how we impact the planet around us. It's also positioned from the perspective of a kid. There are lots of systems you can't change, but you can pick up the trash around you and handle it appropriately. EcoQuest is a Sierra point-and-click adventure game made with their Sid Hub engine, the same engine used for the early wave of point-and-click King's Quest games, and the form you'll mostly recognize as sort of the style used by games in the adventure game studio mold. There is a list of actions you can take, represented by buttons, which you access by right-clicking through them or by moving the mouse to the top of the screen to select the proper one. You move the protagonist around in a space made up of interconnected rooms, and those rooms are full of objects that have problems, and you have things that can fix those problems. There isn't much innovation in EcoQuest as far as games and puzzles go, yet the game stands apart from the other Sierra types. First of all, you can't die or fail in EcoQuest. There's no haha funny death sequencing. This means the puzzles also have a lot fewer dead-end effects. A thing Sierra games were really fond of doing was telling you how you were doing the wrong thing by killing you when you tried it. In EcoQuest, you don't die, so instead the game tends towards giving you more clear feedback about why a thing didn't work, with a "that didn't work" response only given for things that really make no sense to interact with one another. The lack of deaths, however, doesn't mean that the extra content of finding deaths is gone. Instead, the game has a scoring system of 725 points, and you can finish the game with as few as 200. That means that if you want to score all the points, you have to spend a lot of time in the game looking at things, learning about things, fixing every little problem, cleaning things, and finding the best solutions to each problem. And the game even gives you little rewards and hopeful messages if you do. The big challenge of this game is therefore not about using a small number of things correctly in a small space, but instead is about finding the right sequence of problems to solve in what order. It brings you to that same LucasArts problem space of trying to find the loose thread on a large sweater to unravel, and there's a lot less pure physical comedy to reward you. Yet, despite that, it means that a lot of the play spaces are big, and there's a lot of different stuff to poke at. When you're done with an area, it usually signals that pretty clearly too. None of this is meant to say that the game is perfect, or even particularly great. It's got a bunch of signposting problems, and there's at least one puzzle that hangs around way too long. But, broadly speaking, EcoQuest plays better than any other Sierra game of this generation. One of the things that makes EcoQuest stand apart from other games from Sierra at this time, though, isn't just the lack of death. That could be attributed to the people it's targeting, a game for kids. No, it's that EcoQuest is so utterly sincere and focused on its message. The ocean is rad. Animals are rad. The environment is rad. So taking care of that environment is also rad. The whole story is the kind of thing a 10-year-old kid could love. You have a talking animal friend and you're saving a whale and you're helping an underwater kingdom that the adults don't know about or care enough about yet. This shows up in the interface. The game includes a recycle button, and there are items all over the place in the game world that are trash, that, left alone, make the space worse. So you can use the bag to pick up trash, and as ridiculous as it seems, and as rarely as this is used for the good of the game's puzzles, it is still something that the game thinks matters enough that you should be doing it for the whole game. The game just cares. It wants you to care. It wants to make it easy to care, and it wants you to ground in what was at the time the most approachable scientific information about recycling and care for animals. What strikes me about it at this point in time is that there is, to me, hope. There is hope presented in this silly game as it showed us, children of the time, things from history. A moment of what we saw as the impending problem of the now, and realizing that caring about it and fixing some of these things actually happened. Some of it hasn't. We haven't fixed anything big enough. But in this game about the environment from the early 90s, where there was a fear of propaganda infiltrating children and making them care about things that they shouldn't, there were some problems, some things that we, the little kids, could look at and address and then get people to care about enough to fix. This game is overwhelmed with what I called at the time the cringe of care. That there was stuff that you, 10-year-old child, could do to help the environment, which is on one level factually true, and yet now, all those years later, feels fanciful and limited. What I will tell you is that pretty much my entire life, ever since it became a choice, I've been recycling. I'm not saying this game taught me to be a better person, but I think this game helped set me on the right path towards thinking that was worth doing. You can look back at 90s nostalgia and indeed 90s environmentalism with a sort of desperate sadness and embarrassment, a secondhand shame about, look at all this work that was done to convince kids that the environment mattered and all the good it did. But the thing is, it did. It did at least contribute to some good in that overwhelmingly younger people, and by that I mean people 40 years old and younger, generally think the environment is a thing we can work to protect and a thing that we should work to protect. The problem isn't the attitude, which was the problem of the 90s. The notion was that the problems of environmentalism were just that not enough people cared, so not enough political will was there to do the thing. The issue we know now is that political will won't change things. These are tasks and problems set in place by intractable situations of people who have too much power concentrated too much. And that Adam picking up trash is helpful, but it's even more helpful when Adam is backed up by people who are willing to blow up pipelines. There are things you can't do as an individual, and there are difficulties presented by caring about the environment in, existential ways that we sometimes strain at. But going back and playing EcoQuest again, it's a little heartening, a little hopeful, and it reminds me that we did have other impending disasters in my lifetime. Big, wide problems, some technological and some natural, and we did successfully fix them. part of why we fixed them is we cared. I think I need this kind of thing right now. I think I need to remember that the problem isn't that I didn't recycle enough. The problem is that there are people who profit from keeping things bad.